So good morning once again. Thank you all for coming to hear our panel on Westminster School District of Orange County versus Mendez. This is the precursor to the segregation cases that many of us talk about and teach in law school, in particular Brown versus Board of Education. We're fortunate to have a very distinguished group of panelists here to talk about the case, about the effort to draw more attention to the case, and about the lessons that it holds for us going forward as we continue to recognize and seek to address inequality in our schools. My name's Jonathan Glader. I teach here at the law school, and we are incredibly fortunate to have with us this morning Sophia Mendez, who's directly affected by the outcome of the case. The plaintiffs, for those who don't know, the plaintiffs in this case challenged the segregation of children of Mexican descent or with Mexican-sounding names in public schools of Orange County, arguing that this practice denied the children the equal protection of the laws of the state of California and thereby deprived them of their liberty and property without due process of law protected by the 14th Amendment of the federal Constitution. I'm here quoting from the opinion. I note that the case, as addressed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, challenged a practice, not a law, a significant distinction of segregating children. And I note that part of the reasoning rested on the conclusion that had the state of California by law mandated segregation, as it had with children of Asian descent, then the outcome could conceivably have been different. But rather than going into somewhat dated legal doctrine at this point, we first invite Ms. Mendez and one of our panelists, Sergio Contreras, am I pronouncing this correctly? To speak for about 10 minutes about the Mendez Historic Freedom Trail and Monument and what looks to be increasing attention to the case. Sergio Contreras is a Westminster City Councilman, Westminster Mendez Tribute Freedom Trail and Monument Committee founder, a former Westminster School Board president, and former city commissioner. In his day job, as he puts it in the biography, he's the Senior Director of Education and Healthy Schools for the Orange County United Way. I'm going to turn it over to him for a few moments. I will then introduce our other panelists and we'll proceed from there.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Seems a little somber in here, but good morning. My name is Sergio Contreras, and I'm really excited to be here today. But before I even get into what I'm about to share, it's really an honor for me to share this moment with a living civil rights icon, Sophia Mendez. So I'll just turn it to her, and then you'll hear about the small stuff that I'm working on.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. Well, as the daughter of Gonzalo and Felicitas Mendez, I am so proud to be the daughter of this wonderful family that fought. And it wasn't only Gonzalo and Felicitas Mendez. It was 5 families, Guzman, Palomino, Estrada, and Ramirez, that joined in the effort to fight Mendez versus Westminster. And I have kept on the legacy of going across the country and speaking about Mendez versus Westminster. I just came back from Florida. I'm going to Oregon, and then I'm going to Illinois to speak about it. And the first thing I ask when I get there is, how many of you have heard about Mendez versus Westminster? Oh, wonderful. Here you have. But there are some people that have not heard about it. Is that true? And it's so important that everybody knows about Mendez versus Westminster, how 5 people were able to stand against the establishment and fight for equal education for everyone. And these 5 families fought, and you'll hear all about it by our panelists about Mendez versus Westminster. And I just think it's so important that the whole country knows about Mendez versus Westminster as I go around talking about it, because it is so important right now that everybody has equal education. As you all are aware right now, that even though it was fought in 1945 and won 1947, we have what you call de facto segregation right now. And it is so important that our students know that people have been fighting for equal education since 1930 in the Lemon Grove incident. And we continue to fight today that everybody has equal and just education. So I keep the legacy of my parents to go around talking about equal education. And today I am so happy to be here with all of you and with Sergio, we're finally going to have a monument built in Westminster, where it all happened. My father's legacy lives on every day in the schools across our country because he was brave enough to stand up against the establishment at that time. And it wasn't just for Gonzalo, Geronimo, and I, who we were, and I was denied entry into that white school here in Orange County. Because when he went to the superintendent of schools, they told him, Gonzalo, if you fight the stuff, forget the lawyer, we'll allow your children to go into that white school. And that's when he stood up and he said, I am not just fighting for my children, I'm fighting for para todos los niños, for all the children. At that time, there was 5,000 Latinos that were not being allowed to go into white schools. So we continue with the legacy. We as a country now enjoy equal opportunities for public education, regardless of skin color. And that was one of the main reasons I was denied entry, because of my color. And I couldn't be more proud to see this tribute to my father being erected right here in Orange County, where it all started, where I was born 82 years ago. I always have to say that. And I continue with this talking about this historical case that happened here in Orange County. And now we are pleading that people help to contribute to the Mendez tribute here in Orange County by donating to the Mendez tribute here. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, thank you, Sylvia, for being here this morning and sharing this moment with us. I'm very excited. I'm currently a councilman in the city of Westminster. I happen to be the first elected Latino to the Westminster School Board back in 2004. I'm pretty excited. Not only the first, but one of the best. Right? It's about character and quality and awesomeness. So I was the first elected Latino and re-elected in 2008, and I also became the first elected city councilman in the city of Westminster, as far as Latino, and also the best, and re-elected in 2016. So I'm very honored, very privileged. I've known Sylvia since 2000, when I ran for school board in 2000, the first time in my life, and I lost. And I ran again in 2002, and I lost. And it was Sylvia Mendez that picked me up again and inspired me to continue moving forward to improve education for all students in Orange County and in Westminster. And so as years went on, we always looked for ways. I honestly didn't learn about the Mendez case until I was in college working on my undergrad. I was at Cal State Long Beach. I had one of those papers where I had to do research, and I was thumbing through books, and I noticed a story about this girl named Sylvia and the Mendez family, who had been fighting for equal education. And I kept looking, I kept saying Westminster, but I live in Westminster, so is it Westminster, England? Is it Westminster? So it was really kind of a fascinating, it was an eye-opening experience, and I kept reading, and I learned that this actually happened in my backyard. And I thought, here I am in my 20s, early 20s, and I'm learning about the Mendez case for the first time. And so as time went on, there's been a lot of work that's been done to educate the community on the Mendez case, which we'll hear some of the fascinating work that's been done throughout the years. But for me, I wanted to take it one step further. I thought, you know what, why is it in Westminster there isn't even a marker in Westminster acknowledging the case? There isn't even there really isn't anything in Westminster acknowledging the case. And I thought, you know what, the civil rights movement started here in Westminster, and what can I do in my role as a councilman to bring this case to life? And so I'm very excited to share a little bit about what I'm up to. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the case because you kind of know already about it, but what makes it really exciting is Westminster is a very diverse city. We are now 52% Vietnamese, about 12%, 18% Latino, and about 28% white, and the rest other. So it's changed so much since when I went to school. But it's incredible. I'm actually now the only non-Vietnamese councilman in Westminster, which makes it even more exciting. I'm very excited of the work that we've done since we started this project. We started this last year. We've been talking about it for about 8 years, but we're actually starting to move forward this time around. And we've actually secured a new space, which you saw that dirt lot, which is going to be our new location for the monument. It's going to be a pocket park. And so our goal is to raise about $100,000. We received our first donation for $20,000 with the help of the superintendent of schools, Al Mijares, with the college board. They made their first significant donation to the work. We're very excited about that. Here's a little bit about the piece, how it's going to look. But here's our sculptor, which is Ignacio Gomez. He's actually one of the famed sculptor who has some really incredible work. He has actually designed really significant pieces throughout California and the country. One of them, which is the Mendez Monument in Riverside, some of you may have seen, and the Cesar Chavez Monument up north. There's a little more detail. Basically, two students walking towards equality. Our goal is to immerse students in the case to learn specifics about the case. So the book behind Mr. Mendez is going to be key because it'll spell specifically the stories and the challenges he went through and the families went through to make this astounding achievement. What I like to do is I like to take things to the next level. That's just what I do. And so I'm very excited because we were able to partner with the Orange County Department of Ed to not only build this monument, but actually build a trail that leads to the monument where students will be able to literally walk the trail and learn about the Mendez case and culminate at the actual monument. So we've been very blessed to receive a grant for $2.3 million from the state as part of their their state greening grant. We're one of the only cities in Orange, and actually in California that received these grants. I think there was a total of 3. Which was exciting is that this used to be an old trail. I got a minute left. So this used to be an old trail. Your left-hand side, that's what it used to look like. Even when I went to high school in the area, I grew up in Westminster, it always looked like that. So we've cleaned it up a little bit. That's sort of phase 1. Phase 2 is we're going to add an extra sort of barrier, a bike lane. But on the right-hand side, you see the panels that we're working on. And so the Department of Ed is now helping us design curriculum and these panels that'll basically, the interpretive panels to again share the case as students go along the trail and then again culminate towards the end. So we're very excited about it. This is one of a kind. I don't know anyone else is doing this actually in Westminster or in the country. This is an opportunity that I think few will be a part of. Again, this is a $3.7 million project. Right in the heart of Westminster, right where the Mendez case took place. Literally, if you see here, you have Hoover Street where the panels will be located, and then Westminster Avenue. Oh, but on the corner there, I don't think it's on the very corner. That was where the old white school was at, and so and 1 block away from that, where the monument will stand, and if you go 2 blocks to the left, is where the Mexican school was located. So, I think it's a really significant location. It just really kind of tells you how far we've come. It's hard to believe that that's actually happened. Why now? I mean, again, we have the 55th anniversary coming. There are no other memorials recognizing this. And then without the segregation, we wouldn't have a black president, a Vietnamese mayor in Westminster, Mexican-American councilman, and of course, all the great things that have happened in our country since. Again, the MendezTribute.com, if you haven't written it down, MendezTribute.com, you can donate online. But I'm very, you know what really blows me about all this is that, you know, you read stories about the civil rights movement and some of the people that are still alive today, but really Sylvia Mendez is part of this project. Here's a picture of her brothers who were denied access to the school. And after I took this photo, I thought to myself, whoa, these are your brothers and Gonzalo Mendez's family who was denied and now made it possible for us to be where we're at today. So with that, I'm done, and I'll take my seat.
Okay, I need to introduce our other panelists. To the left of Sergio is Dr. Jeff Hittenberger, who serves as Chief Academic Officer at the Orange County Department of Education. These are very abbreviated bios because I suspect you all will have questions, so I'm not doing them justice. I apologize to them before I'll apologize again. To my right is Judge Kirk Nakamura, member, I will say an anteater. Sorry, but he went to Duke Law School only because we didn't exist yet. And
a better basketball team.
For now. And to his right is Sandra Roby. She is the Emmy-winning producer and writer of the PBS documentary, Mendez versus Westminster for All the Children. She's done other things as well. Again, I'm going to keep it very brief. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out to Michael Lee, who helped make this panel happen. So thank you. Okay, so I have a few questions for our panelists, and I'm going to ask that you limit to your responses, panelists, to about 5 to 7 minutes each so that there's time for questions at the end. And Judge Nakamura, I would like to start with you. Could you give us a bit of background about what led up to this case?
Well, ironically, one of the factual foundations of how this all happened arises out of the Japanese-American internment. And the fact that the farm that was owned by the Minamitsus was in danger of being lost because during their internment, Executive Order 9066, the Japanese-American were given maybe a couple of weeks to get their affairs in order. Otherwise, they lose all their belongings. In this case, the Minamitsus had a farm. Coincidentally, my father's family also had a farm in that situation. And ultimately, a banker came in and assisted the Minamitsus to find someone who would continue their business while they were interned. There's obviously lease payments to be made, or in certain situations where the land is actually held in, usually was held in the name of the miners to try to get around the alien land laws, which prohibited Japanese Americans at that time and Asians from holding a long lease or actually owning land at that point in time. So unless these lease payments were made or the mortgage was going to be paid, that land was going to be lost. And about 3/4 of the Japanese Americans who had land in that situation lost their land. In this case, fortunately, we had the Mendez who stepped in and ultimately ran that farm and were able to profit from it, which was good. And I think the Minamitsus would agree that what they did with the money in terms of proceeding with this case was one of the best uses of those profits. So one of the authors of trying to get the Japanese Americans disenfranchised was the Attorney General, who so happened to be a man called Earl Warren. So that's one of the ironies of the whole situation. 8 years later, after Mendez, there's a decision called Brown versus Board of Education, which was authored by a Supreme Court Justice named Earl Warren, who happened to be the same person. He was later, after he became Attorney General, he was very popular, became the governor of California, ultimately was appointed as the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So fittingly, it was kind of like a circular situation and very ironic that the whole situation that happened that led up to the Mendez decision was a result of, I think, blatant racism on behalf of many Californians getting the Japanese Americans interned, put them in a situation where they could not otherwise get their property retained unless they found somebody to continue with their farms. That happened to my father's family. They were able to get their workers to continue with the farm and have it afterwards, after the internment, 3 years coming back after being returned, continue with the business. There was a huge loss, according to my father, when I talked about it. He estimated it to be in the area of $100,000. These were very profitable business, and probably because of the profitability and the competitiveness of these Japanese Americans' farms, this incited and also stoked the prejudice against them. So that's some of the background of the facts that led up to the Mendez situation.
Ms. Ruby, could you give us some of the details of the case and what event in particular triggered it?
What event? Can you hear me? Is this on? I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Yeah, all right. Okay. So what events triggered it?
Yes.
So, so I grew up in Westminster as well, and so this case is very, very near and dear to me. What events triggered it? Well, actually, what many life truths became apparent to me when I learned about Mendez, and one of them is that history takes time and that it takes a long time for ideas to steep and grow and move. And so I'm so grateful for like where we are with now with Sergio, because in my undergrad I had a class in social movements, and I had a professor named Dick Flax who was very involved in the 60s. And I remember him vividly saying in class that my students don't like to hear this, but you need to know that history takes time. And I remember as he said that thinking, what do you mean it takes time? We don't have time for time. We need change now. But the moment I learned about Mendez, when I learned about it was in the newspaper when the school was going to be built, I was like a cyborg where all the gears went into place, and I understood so many life truths. And one of them was that, yes, history takes time. And that I realized, and I was shocked and hurt, and also that I understood how we're all connected, and that I knew that by the time I was done, everybody had to know about this. But one of the things was that history takes time. And I realized if we want Mendez taught in our schools, I've got to get started now, because Mendez started, they were turned away from the school in 1943. The case started in 45, the federal decision in 46, the appeal in 47, Brown in 54, Little Rock in 57, the American Civil Rights Act in 64. If I want Mendez taught in our schools, I've got to get started now, because I may not live to see it. And it takes time for people like Sergio and Jeff to get their educations and move into positions of power to make those changes possible. And I am so grateful for Sergio to be there, to be the one who persisted, because history takes time. And people have to get used to ideas. So the things that led up to Mendez even precede World War II. I don't know if any of you have heard of a case called Lemon Grove that happened in San Diego, which, as far as we know, was the first successful school desegregation case in the nation. But even besides court cases, I want to call attention to the interactions that happen every day that led up to that awareness that things need to change. And I've spoken to so many people in law schools, and they talk about how our students have the mistaken notion that decisions that change our society come from on high. They come from the Supreme Court, and they make an edict and it comes down. It does not happen that way. It comes up. So the things that led up to Mendez versus Westminster were the awareness that American equality was a dream that was not fulfilled for many people of many colors and women all across the country. So this came up from women's rights, it came up from segregation against Asian Americans, Native Americans, and specifically it cataclysmed in World War II, where you have the Holocaust happening, Japanese internment happening, and then with Mendez versus Westminster, segregation against against Latinos. And specifically, I want to call out that you've heard the saying that one man's ceiling is another man's floor. That if you don't have the idea that something is possible, you may not even reach for that because you don't think it's possible. History is only possible from your perspective at your time. And I always tell students, if you hear in your head the voice that somebody should do something, you need to stop and write that down, because that may only be available from your perspective in your place in history, because nobody before may have thought that that was possible. And Mr. Mendez grew up in Westminster. He was an immigrant. He grew up in Westminster, and he actually attended the 17th Street School when he was young. And years later, when they went to enroll his children at the school and they said no, he was like, oh no, that's not okay. I went there, and now you're saying this is not okay for my children? When they went to go to try to bring other children or other families from the barrio to get involved in the case, they said, what are you talking about? This is better than my school for my kids in Mexico, and you're asking me to do something different? They never they could not imagine that. And so he had a particular perspective that said equality is possible for me, and I'm not going to stop for anything less. And even when the families, even after segregation, integration happened, when the Mendez and the other families were involved, they, Gonzalo, in my documentary, which I think you guys all got the link for that. It's a very humble half-hour film. I was the world's oldest intern when we did it, but we won an Emmy, and it's helped to get, the party started in a lot of ways. Jerome talks about how after integration happened, they started going to the schools together with white kids, and his white friends would start to invite him over to their house. And his mom was like, what are you talking about? My kid's going over to white people's house? And then Jerry would do the same thing. He'd invite them over to spend the night at his house. And his mom was like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. So she could imagine their children going to the same school, but imagining that they would actually become friends and that they would go to the next level, that was beyond their scope. So those are the things that led up to the case. And I always talk to students when they ask, what do you need to make change? I heard one speaker say, very involved in civil rights and social justice issues, said, you need passion. And I wanted to throw down my papers and say, don't tell them that, because passion is not enough. You can burn your passion out in a year and think that you have failed, because it's going to take time. That's why it's called a life's work. You need so many people to come on board with the ideas and use their power to do things that you could not imagine, but they can imagine from where they are and who they are to make those things happen, because nobody does it alone. And it is people moving and making those changes possible. Everybody moving. So I am so happy to be involved with Mendez, and so happy that the Mendez family has allowed me to help to share their story. But I'm hoping that people can use this story to see their place and the power that they have, that truly does send a ripple out into the future to make everything possible for all of us.
So, Mr. Contreras, we've seen from your presentation, as someone who grew up in Orange County, that this case matters a great deal to you. Can you share some of the reasons why?
Yeah, thank you. But before I do, I don't know if you can hear me. Before I do, I want to acknowledge my boss. Who doesn't want to acknowledge their boss? My boss, Sue Parks, who's in the back over there, CEO of the Orange County United Way, who's here this morning. For me, I mean, growing up in Westminster, I'm very fortunate that I never had to go through that experience of having to go to a segregated school. So for me, it speaks volumes. It says everything is possible. I think with this monument project is it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate and excited about it, is because it serves as a monument. This case serves as a monument that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Just ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And to think about the Mendez family and the challenges, and you know, he wasn't a son of a senator or an attorney, or he wasn't a judge. He was a citizen in his city who was not okay with the situation. So for me, to be able to tell that story, I mean, we have a lot of great places for students to visit in Orange County. I mean, they visit the La Brea Tire Pits, or they'll go to Discovery Cube, or they'll go to Capistrano Mission, and then they'll come back and make one out of sugar cubes, and you know, life goes on. But for me, to create a space in Orange County where all students from Orange County, no matter what their backgrounds are or where they come from, what school district they attend to, they can come visit Westminster and walk the trail and learn about these incredible people, these families, and this case that made it possible for them to be on that bus, to be on that field trip. To me, that speaks volumes, and I feel it's my duty as a human being and as a elected to be able to share that story. And that's why I'm super overly positive about it. And I just think it's long overdue. I think to have Sylvia, thank God she's still here, to be able to see that. I mean, to me, that says a lot. The fact that she's still with us today speaks volumes. And so, you know, again, I come from a diverse city. I mean, we have the first Vietnamese mayor in the country. I mean, it just shows you how far we come, and this should serve as a monument. That's, again, Sylvia touched on it, and Sandra touched on it, and it wasn't just for Mexicans, it's for everyone. And I think because of it, we're all here today. We're here this morning sharing and learning together, and I think that we need to do more to share this case in whatever way we can. I mean, this is like, I feel like it's a duty and a calling, so that's kind of my behind it, the scene sort of reasoning behind it, but I do hope this is only the beginning.
Dr. Hittenberger, as someone who works in the OC Department of Education, can you tell us a little bit about the impact of the case here in Orange County? What's changed? What still needs to change?
Thank you so much, and I do want to express my appreciation to the UCI School of Law for hosting this event, Karen and the Dean and Mike Lee, and thank all of you for being here and caring about this really important issue for our community. If I were to place a headline on it, I would say Mendez versus Westminster brought dramatic change to Orange County education, to California education, but the change is far from complete. And let me talk a little bit to both the positive side and the challenge side of that equation. On the positive side, Orange County is a much more diverse place than it was 70 years ago, and even 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and especially when you look at public education. We have almost 500,000 K-12 public school students in Orange County, 500,000, that's a lot of students. Of those 500,000 students, about 49% are Latino, about 26% are white, non-Hispanic, about 16% Asian American, and about 9% are other ethnicities or more than one, as self-reported by students. So it's a very diverse community. And that diversity is also shaping changes in leadership and curriculum in Orange County and across the state of California. As Sergio mentioned, our county superintendent of schools, Dr. Almijares, is the first Latino to fulfill that role. He just was reelected to a new term and brings tremendous consciousness of these issues to his leadership role in the county. Likewise, schools have never been more focused on equity, inclusion, and diversity than they are now. And that is affecting curriculum. Sandra mentioned bringing to the classroom the Mendez versus Westminster story in the 2016 History Social Science Framework for the state of California. Mendez versus Westminster is now mentioned at least three different grade levels. And so there's the beginning of the inclusion of this story in the education across the state. Those are positive changes. Ed Data has put together something called the Ethnic Diversity Index. That is a scale from 0 to 76 that is meant to describe the degree to which a school or a district or a county is integrated in public schools. 0 would be if 100% of your students are from the same ethnicity. 76 is the most diverse school in California. Orange County on that index gets a 50. So that is, in the aggregate, not a bad score when you compare it to other regions or other parts of the country. So those are some of the positives. On the challenge side, the truth is, as Sylvia pointed out, de facto segregation is still very much with us. Segregation by ethnicity and income level is still very much a reality in Orange County. Though we have a 50 on the Ethnic Diversity Index in the aggregate, if you look at individual schools and communities, you'll find that a lot of schools still have a 1, a 2, a 3, or something below a 10 on that Ethnic Diversity Index, meaning that virtually all the students in that school are from a single ethnic group. So the reality on the ground is a little bit different. Now, that's not the fault of the schools, it's not the fault of the districts. They're serving the students in their communities, but it's a function of segregated housing patterns, which in turn are a function of economic inequities that we all know are very real. When you consider the changes that are necessary to rectify those problems, we have our work cut out for us. What I would like to highlight in closing is this is not obviously an Orange County phenomenon only. The Government Accounting Office in 2016 put out a report to Congress about this issue of segregation in American schools, de facto segregation, and they described a category of schools that are high poverty and low integration. High poverty, low integration. That percentage of schools in the United States is going up, not down. And that's true in Orange County as well. Over 20% of our schools in Orange County are high poverty, low integration schools. And that number is up significantly in the past 10 years. So that's troubling. And it goes in the wrong direction, if you will, given what the Mendez family, the Mendez case was envisioning. And obviously it's a function of more families struggling to make ends meet. And one indicator of that is something called the Federal Free and Reduced Lunch Program. To be eligible to participate in that today, a family has to make less than $46,000 a year for a family of 4. Now think about it in Orange County. If you're making $46,000 or less and you're a family of 4 in Orange County, you're struggling to make ends meet. Students eligible 10 years ago were 40% of Orange County students. 10 years later, today it's 49%. So students 49% of our students are in families that are struggling seriously to make ends meet, and oftentimes that translates into housing instability, You're aware of the homelessness crisis that we have in Orange County. So these are very practical impacts on our students. So my final point is this. Thanks to Sylvia and the Mendez family and many others who have made sacrifices over the years, we have made very significant progress in Orange County and California and the United States. But the work is far from complete. We have our work cut out for us, and a gathering like this today helps us all to recommit ourselves to the work that we need to do to continue to bring about the realization of the vision that Sylvia and her family had 70 years ago.
So that's a perfect segue to my last question that I want to put to the panel as a whole, because we are at a moment of rising income and wealth inequality. We are at a moment of increasing political divisiveness along lines of ideology, race, class, and all of you and Professor Hassan at the beginning kind of emphasized the importance of coalition building, the ideal of coalition building as a way to achieve more progressive ends. So my question is, how do we move forward? How do we overcome these divisions that seem to be widening and deepening in order to achieve the cause of greater equity in education? And I will throw that out to whoever wants to.
Can I say something? With respect to the Mendez decision, I think it's a landmark situation in that it represented a coalition of various groups, including the JCL, which is the political arm of the Japanese American community, which supported the Mendezes. This is not necessarily the case historically. Historically, we've had disparate interests in terms of various groups. But if people look at the larger picture, we could see how a Mendez decision basically benefits all minority groups. And that was a foresight that we had in the Mendez case. With respect to Brown versus Board of Education, the JCL also filed an amicus brief in that. I want to point out one of the decisions that was going on while the Japanese Americans were being interned. There was the discrimination against the Japanese Americans, even when they were interned, was consistent and unrelenting. The Solicitor General, actually the Attorney General, was trying to deprive the Japanese Americans under the Alien Land Law, saying that by holding these lands in the name of their children, this was basically a subterfuge, a fraud on that land. And this is a government-sponsored effort to escheat the Japanese Americans of their land. There's also a situation where this same group, led by the prior Attorney General of California, tried to disenfranchise the Japanese Americans from voting. And in connection with that, they tried to overturn the birthright citizenship laws. And the NAACP and the ACLU stepped in and saw that this was a way to try to deprive all immigrants of their status of citizens. I'm sure you've heard this as an issue today. So this is a situation where we have to look at the broader effects of what is going on when a single racial group or a minority of some sort is being targeted.
So one of the big life truths that became really obvious to me when I joined Mendez is that the stories we tell us who we are and who we can be. I'm going to say that again because this is so important to me. The stories we tell us who we are and who we can be. And what I love about the Mendez story is I don't look at it as a case. I look at it as a story. It is beyond the paper and words in this court case. It's beyond the transcript. That when I learned about Mendez, I saw for the first time a story that included people of all colors, Asian Americans, Native Americans, African Americans, women taking leadership roles in my hometown that changed the nation. That made me aware that this is possible. And so, and I finally found a story that desegregated the way we talk about American civil rights history. It blows down the walls. And so what is real, and in fact, when I did my documentary, here are 2 criticisms I received. I received a lot of criticism, let me tell you for sure. When you stand in the full force of America's freedom of speech, you gotta have friends that are gonna hold you up like this, because this is another thing I realized, is that you can be elected president of the United States and not receive 50% of the vote. You don't even receive the popular vote. So if at any time you are standing up to say something, you gotta be prepared for 150 million people not to agree with you. So that's something on the side. But to have a story, I want to encourage people to not look at the Mendez case just as a case. Because one person said, I was at a Chicano studies class at a school, I won't say where, and after I did it, when I did my documentary, I did it for no budget, no pay. As I said, I was the world's oldest intern, and I got some money afterwards from the Orange County 100 men of African American men of Orange County, 100 black men of Orange County, and the Orange County Black Chamber of Commerce. And they flew me to New York to collect an interview with Robert L. Carter, who worked with Thurgood Marshall to write. He actually wrote the friend of the court brief that went to Mendez. And that served as the model for the argument in Brown versus Board of Education. So I included that 2-minute excerpt at the front of my documentary afterwards. And when I was at this Chicano Studies class, the professor showed the new version of the documentary, and afterwards he said to me as the class was walking out, he goes, why did you put that story with the NAACP at the front? We finally had a story about us, and now you made it about them. And I just wanted to stop the class and say, everybody come back. We got to talk about this. I had somebody else say to me, Sandra, you only had 28 minutes to tell this story. Why did you go into the Japanese internment about this? And I want to say, stop right there. This is about all of us. We have to stop that. And that's what I'm hoping, that as we celebrate Mendez versus Westminster, that we hold people accountable to show that it is not just about Latinos. If at the end of all of this, it becomes just a Latino story, I will feel that I have failed. I want to present a story that is about all of us and has everybody feel that this is us.
I want to share a little bit about some of the work that we're doing at the Orange County United Way to build equity in Orange County in education. We have this program called Youth Career Connections, where we provide high school students, particularly in high need areas. In this case, we're talking about Garden Grove Unified School District, where we provide students with exposure to career awareness, whether through a field trip or through a guest speaker in their classroom, or teacher externship, or providing teacher support to give them better access and up-to-date education on their career path, or the best experience, which is an internship opportunity, which they'll actually have an internship at a business of their choice, either in arts and media, engineering. I won't get into specifics and drag this out further, but one of the things that we've been working really hard at the United Way is building partnerships with our universities, with our Department of Ed, with community colleges and local school districts to build these opportunities for students. And one of the things I could say in terms of what we're doing is we're working on tearing down walls and barriers for students, because I won't get into specifics either in terms of some of the adventures that we've had in trying to provide high school students in low-income communities access to high-quality internships. But there was actually a time where, last summer, where we were working on a summer internship for a student that lived in Garden Grove, but this opportunity happened to be in Irvine. And so I don't know if you know much about the ROP, but ROP has boundaries, and there are certain sections, and there's certain areas that service certain schools. And I remember at this meeting, we're working with some folks, and they're like, we can't have students leave. We can't have students leave their service area out of Garden Grove and come into Irvine. That's not the area. That's not their jurisdiction. And I said to them, that's the reason they are where they are, because they don't have the access and the opportunities that other students do. So what can we do together to make sure that child gets that same opportunity? So that's some of the things that we do every day at the United Way, is advocate for all students, regardless of their socioeconomic background, to provide them quality opportunities, regardless of where they live. So that's kind of an example, and that's Youth Career Connections. You can learn more about it on our website at Orange County United Way.
It's a fantastic program. In this sort of call to action, I first want to affirm what my colleagues have all said. There's some tremendous opportunities to get involved in Orange County with the work that Sergio's doing, that Sandra's doing. If you're interested in that, I would really encourage you to talk to them after the meeting. Part of what we're talking about really is closing the opportunity gap and finding ways of creating and supporting opportunities that students might not otherwise have. And that's the kind of work that Sandra and Sergio are involved in. Let me mention a couple others. I would really encourage you, especially if you're a law school student, and which we may have a few here today, if you're not currently mentoring a high school student, really think about mentoring a high school student. Almost every high school in Orange County is looking for people who will serve as mentors to students. And it can make, internships is a huge and dramatic thing in students' lives, and mentorships also are that kind of life-transforming experience. One place you might think about is Sylvia's alma mater, Santa Ana High School. They have a legal studies academy. That is for students who have indicated an interest in becoming attorneys or otherwise entering the legal profession. They have an academy there. They're looking for mentors for every one of those students. It's in partnership with the California Bar, the state bar, which is supporting law academies across the state in the effort to open the pipeline to create a more diverse legal profession in California. So you could conceivably be part of mentoring a student within that Legal Studies Academy at Santa Ana High School. There's also, we could mention the Constitutional Rights Foundation, mock trial, peer court. There are all kinds of really significant opportunities to get involved with students and bring your legal expertise into things that empower students. So I'd really encourage you to think about what is that thing. And finally, support the Mendez tribute.
Yes.
Sergio threw out the figure $2 million. That's for the trail. That's not for the monument. The monument is 100% going to be 100% privately raised funds. So I would really encourage you to support that, and not just financially, but get involved, learn about it, become a part of that movement.
And are there questions that you all have for our panelists? If not, I have more, but. Yeah.
I have two quick questions. One is, Robbie, what is the link to your documentary? And the second one is Pittenberg, the statistics you cited, do they apply to all schools in Orange County, or including the private and religiously affiliated ones, or just the public schools?
So, Karen, I don't know if you were able to send out the link to the attendees, because I had sent, it's on a private YouTube channel right now. So it may be in the pack, or you can email me at sandra.robbie@yahoo.com. I'll be happy to send you the link, and follow me on Instagram, because we got lots of fun things we're working on with the Mendez Museum for Peace and Freedom that we're going in Old Town Orange, which is a time capsule from the segregation era. Sandra, with a D, not a J. I think J would be fun, though. Sandra.robbie@yahoo.com. And I'm Sandra Roby on Instagram. And we're going to be doing lots of fun things.
Yes, regarding, excellent question. The data I shared with you is specifically for public schools. So about 7% of our students in Orange County go to private schools, and about 7%. And if you look at private schools, you have a full range from really well integrated students within a school to not so well integrated schools. But I don't have specific figures though for the ethnic diversity index for private schools.
I just wanted to share that at UCI School of Law, we do have a really wonderful pipeline program working with students from Santa Ana, Anaheim, and Garden Grove school districts. It's called the Saturday Academy of Law, and we are pairing up some wonderful teachers from those schools in combination with our own students and bringing ninth graders here to campus for 6 Saturdays. And they're learning about the First Amendment, and they're learning to do their own oral arguments, and then it works on their writing skills. And so I think together with all of these important initiatives, UCI does have some really wonderful work with our students and the pipeline coming ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Costa Mesa, and so I'm familiar with the Newport Mesa School District, where there are places of certainly de facto segregation because of the housing patterns, that particularly in elementary schools, there'll be 100% Latino or 80% Latino. When you get to the high schools, there's a lot more integration. And what I'd be interested in is the graduation rates. And if you track the kids who come from the segregated schools in the elementary level, what are their graduation rates? That would help us with our policies. There's a lot of complacency at the school board level in terms of what's happening, with those kids.
That's a great point. I don't have specific data to make that comparison. The overall trend is toward higher graduation rates across the board by ethnicity as well as in the aggregate. However, what I don't have is data on what the graduation rates are if a student comes out of a more segregated elementary school and how they proceed. But that I agree would be great and useful data to have.
Can you guys track it? I mean, is that something you'd like to take on?
We certainly can, yeah. In fact, I'll talk to our evaluation team about that.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question. What are we doing in Orange County and the school district regarding the school to prison pipeline? And is it including the voices of the youth that are being affected directly? And how is that being engaged?
That's an outstanding question. I'll say very briefly, the shift that's taking place in schools is away from sort of a punitive approach to discipline, for example, to restorative practices. And we've seen very significant declines in California in suspension rates and expulsion rates, and we're really working at shifting to a restorative approach that gets students and teachers into circles talking about issues rather than kind of having zero tolerance policies where boom, 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 you start being punitive right off the bat, which leads down a road toward that school to prison pipeline. So there is change happening. We're still in kind of the early phases of that, and there's a lot more work to do, but that consciousness at least is there.
And are we addressing migrant populations in that aspect as well?
Yes. That is happening, but again, we're in early stage. We've got a long way to go.
Time for maybe one more? Yeah.
On the kind of disability rights side, do we have, I know we're talking about kind of graduations and punishment, but do we have information about the difference in accommodations being provided or money being spent on accommodations in the less integrated schools?
It's a tremendous question. I'm glad you brought up disability rights because we could do a really interesting session on PL 94-142 and the dramatic changes that ushered in. Law really matters to how these issues play out, and that's certainly true with disability rights. Without having much time to go into it, I think there is that inclusiveness that is sort of affecting the cultures of schools now is helping us to get at some of the issues that you're raising, but we, again, have a long way to go.
Can I do one more, Rosanna?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Real quick, I'm curious, when you talk about income inequality, okay, so is there a difference in a higher income level area? Do they have better funding for the school versus low? So we're talking about we're not starting at the equal playing field. So is that still true? Because it used to be like the property tax directly tied to funding of the school district. Is that still true?
Without going into detail, I would say it is still true. However, California, especially under Governor Brown, took some very aggressive action to change the way public schooling is funded and to channel more funds toward schools that serve students with higher needs. That's made a big difference, but because the resources in local communities, even if you even out the funding, there are still foundations and other ways that money can flow to schools in more well-off communities that are not an option for lower income communities. So the state has to intervene and provide additional funds to those schools in low-income communities. And thanks to Governor Brown, a lot of that is happening now.
Okay, can we thank our panelists?